Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Change Point Conversations. Thanks for joining us today. I am joined by Pete Casillas. He is the market president and publisher of the Denver Business Journal. I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, it's great. Looking forward to doing this.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk, and I got to give a shout out to Santa Clara University. We're both Santa Clara graduates.
Mater.
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. Different kind of Bronco.
Different kind of Broncos, but I mean, we're diehard Denver Broncos fans, but you got to go with the Santa Clara Broncos. So shout out to SCU.
Yep,
the Bay Area. Well, thanks again for joining, and I think it's really interesting to be able to talk with you because obviously the landscape of media is changing. Things are changing with technology. Anybody can be a writer now, and if you have everybody has a phone in their pocket that you can just pull it up and go, oh yeah, start videoing things, right? And Twitter and all those things like that. You've been in the industry. First, give me a little bit of background of where you came from, and then
sure. So I've been in this industry for approaching 20 years now. Wow. I got my start in my native California. Right after I graduated from college, I moved up to the center of Silicon Valley and went to work for the San Jose Mercury News as a marketing assistant. And it's kind of funny. The guy who hired me, my very first boss, was a tremendous mentor. Enjoyed working for him for only about 2 years before he decided to go off and work for a little startup and tried to convince me to come over a couple of times. And I think at that point I was just falling in love really with the news industry and the media industry. And he kept trying to lure me over there, and we'd have lunch together in their .com cafeteria, and I was close a couple of times. And I oftentimes think right up front that was the road not taken, because he was employee number 49 of a little company called Google, and suffice to say, he's enjoying an early retirement right now.
I was going to say he's got a couple extra zeros in the bank
account. Sure. So might I if I would have gone that way. But the news and information was my calling.
Yeah.
So I decided to take that route.
Those are funny stories. I know so many of this small company.
I feel like if you were in Silicon Valley right around through that .com bubble at the end of the 90s and early 2000s, there's a couple you're a couple degrees of separation from some billionaires, and you're probably a couple degrees of separation from folks that are doing a lot of different things nowadays. Not everyone was a .com billionaire, that's for sure.
Well, a lot of people became .com billionaires and then quickly became .com hundredaires.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly. So in any event,
good for like a couple of years, and then really.
But it was a seminal time there. There's a lot of energy, and I think that contributed to developing a passion for the media business. And part of what my strategy was, if I had a strategy in managing my career, is I wanted to continue to put myself in places where I had more challenge, bigger jobs, and that kind of took me on a little bit of an odyssey around the country. After going to Santa Clara and getting the MBA, I hitched the wagon and made my way to Miami. And lived in Miami for a couple of years, and that was a wonderful experience. Such a unique city. It's really a world city, and enjoyed that. Moved up to New York City. I feel like if you're in big media, at some point your path's going to take you through the Manhattan area, which I did and enjoyed that too. And then came out west and landed in Denver the first time and worked for Media News Group and the Denver Post, and really began to fall in love with Denver. And I then.
That's good.
All right.
Keep going.
All right,
you got a phone in the background.
Sorry.
It's a newsroom.
It's a newsroom. I know.
It's perfect. This buys in. The phone's on screen. What's the hot story?
So I got a phone call from my boss who said, "Hey, how do you feel about moving out to the Bay Area again and running a big part of our media company out in the Bay Area?" And I took that opportunity and went back to San Francisco and worked there in kind of round two, and saw how the interesting change there. A lot of, I think, the heart of technology had begun to move up the San Francisco peninsula from Silicon Valley really into San Francisco, and that was when Twitter and Facebook were really starting to explode and create their media empire. And that was great, and worked out there for a couple of years. Took a little bit of a zigzag and moved from mainstream media into the business to business world, and worked at the San Francisco Business Times, and that was wonderful. And then I got another call, and they lured me back to Denver to become the publisher here at the Denver Business Journal. It's just a fun kind of arc. I'd say that was my first big learning. If you really want to try and move up quickly in your career, it behooves you to take risks, whatever that looks like. In my case, the risk was buying and selling houses in 4 different metro areas in the span of just a handful of years, which was a lot, but a lot of fun.
So, and before we kind of get into where you see media going, I think that's really interesting because we live in a time now, and I think one of the biggest complaints, especially for the younger generation, is nobody's loyal, right? They're moving and bouncing. And I think actually at the core of that, what a lot of that younger generation want is what you tapped into is a new challenge and pushing yourself and going, okay, I've accomplished this. And not necessarily that they're too good for that position, but everybody I think is looking to better themselves and grow. And I think that's really interesting that's exactly what you're talking about, is taking those risks and trying. And it's not that you weren't loyal or doing those things like that. It was self-push and saying, all right, I'm going to try to tackle this new challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes you have to be willing to maybe even accept what might be perceived as a lateral move, or even maybe a half a step backwards to help round out your professional experience, and also I think to kind of develop personally as well. It's not always a linear path that gets you to the next big thing.
Yeah, you don't just stay on this one path. And I was having this conversation with a company recently. They were, well, we hire these young people, and then I asked them, well, what do you want to do? And they don't know what they want to do. And I'm like, that's the wrong question. You should ask them, what skills do you want to develop?
Exactly.
How do you want to become better as a person? Because you may not know exactly what 20 years from now looks like.
Right.
But you know the type of skills that you want, and saying, hey, I need to develop this, or I need to develop that.
Absolutely.
To kind of grow into that.
And you want to put yourself in an environment that has a real that places a premium on just continuing your learning. You know, and I think that's a lot of organizations when they contemplate how to motivate their workforce. I think key component is making sure that people feel like they have an opportunity to continue to develop. I think
I read in a book, and I thought it was great. There's big T and there's little T transformations. Big T are promotions. I mean, people love promotions, but if you can't constantly give promotions, then how do you focus on the little T's, which is transforming the people as an individual and making them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? How am I making you a better person?
Right.
That kind of satisfies that inner need to feel that growth, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, it's interesting, and so obviously being in the publishing and the journalistic and the digital space, what are the biggest challenges you see now moving forward? Like I said, where anybody can be a journalist, where people can create content at any time. What does that mean for your world now?
Well, I think the fundamental challenge, one thing that hasn't changed is if you want to be a successful publisher, you have to really understand your audience, and you need to be passionate about developing content and an experience that is really well suited to that audience. And you're right. I think a lot of the barriers to entry into media have fallen. You don't have to own a printing press or a satellite truck to reach millions of people. But what you do have to do, I think, to sustain that audience is make sure that you continue to really serve them and challenge them and impress them. And that's largely what kind of motivates our organization, is we just ask ourselves, how can we best suit this, or how can we best serve this Denver business community, regardless of the ways that they might choose to interact with us. And certainly that has changed a lot, I think, even certainly in my career, and really even in the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen a transformation in the mediums in which people consume content. I think certainly it's safe to say that the future of consumption of media is going to be oriented around the mobile experience. That's where most of our audience right now is consuming our news and information is via their phone. And at the present time, I think there's certain things that work really well on the small screen and certain things that don't work so well on the small screen. And it behooves you to remember how people are engaging with your content and giving them an experience that's really rich and well suited to the platform. I think that's kind of the biggest aha for us is, look, people appreciate having a plethora of different experiences from small screen to the big screen. Even in the television world, you have your traditional TV viewing experience. You have this phenomenon of OTT, over the top transmission. Netflix has kind of continued to challenge that legacy model. And radio. Podcasting is I think a full-blown mainstream form of info dissemination. You watch how an organization like NPR has evolved and the new mediums in which they try to provide that same kind of nuanced approach to content, and it's fun, it's dynamic. I think if as media professionals, if we pursue the challenge of being relevant over the next 5-10 years with a flexible mindset, and we remember our audience, and we take some risks, there's never been, I think, more desire for local news and information that's quality than right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head that it doesn't matter. Obviously, you got to stay up to date with the platforms that you're getting out, and reaching people is very important. But at the end of the day, the content has to be valuable. I mean, you can, there is ease of use, but if what you're putting out is terrible, it doesn't matter, right? As long as you're staying true to the content that you're building is important and pertinent to your audience. That's the biggest thing you want. Right?
Agreed. And I think, some of what could be considered, let's just stick with, narrowly speaking, kind of journalism, looks a lot different now than it did before. I mean, you could make an argument for, platforms like Snapchat even as a storytelling medium, and figuring out where that sits, and where the citizen journalists producing stories via Snapchat, and now even Instagram. This week, in fact, big. Ooh, they're now doing. They got hip to the Snapchat phenomenon. They're doing their Instagram stories. I think that's great. I think and I think for the millennial audience, these are almost native platforms. They're good at consuming and even producing content there, and for the mainstream media, we really have to figure out how do we best use those, and how do we create separation, I think, from a citizen journalist versus a professionally trained journalist, and making sure that is that, number one, I think you got to start asking the question, is that really important to your audience? Some portion of it, it's extremely important to feel like that the information is well vetted and unbiased and all that stuff, and it can be a little bit blurry. But I do think that if you're successful in being able to make that distinction and show where the value is, media outlets like ours will continue to be very viable over the long haul.
Definitely. And that kind of is an interesting segue, because we are, it's kind of under the radar. There's a presidential election going on right now.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, not many people are talking about it. And obviously I think media always, I feel like every election it plays bigger and bigger a role. And I think even so much this year when you talk about fairness and left and right and all these different things, whether left or right, I'm not in that, but what's your take on that, the role of media within this, the role of, again, being fair, being true? What's kind of your take on what's going on right now?
Well, it's interesting. I think I think the story of this election is we're in a society now that has become so polarized. The folks on the right don't hear the folks on the left, and the folks on the left don't understand the language even that the folks far right are speaking. And unfortunately, it feels like a lot of the big media titles have kind of gravitated to those poles, and there's really now a hole in the big middle. I follow Dan Rather on Facebook, and he's good for every couple of days. Kind of a very, thoughtful. He doesn't necessarily so much opine for yesteryear, but he has a certain perspective and gravitas, I find, that serves to describe what's missing, and that is just kind of that spirit of collaboration, cooperation. We can disagree without being disagreeable. That is just absolutely absent and really, really sad.
Yeah.
And I feel passionate that we need to strive to move it back to that middle in terms of discourse. And I feel like I'm in a fortunate position here at the Denver Business Journal where we don't advocate for any particular candidate. We'll talk about the issues, but we don't editorialize or endorse or what have you. And that in some ways makes my job easier in an election year.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, serves to give us to focus on what is truly important, which is what are the facts, and what's at the heart of the issue, and can we ask the follow-up question that gets to a deeper understanding of what the decision really is that we're trying to make.
Yeah.
And I think our audience I worry less about our audience, which tends to be in the big pragmatic middle. I mean, we're business people. We're trying to get things done.
And you want to get that information. You want to, give me it all, and I'll kind of
absolutely
talk about it.
And leave me my own devices. I'm smart enough to figure out a point of view. So I like that, but it bums me out a little bit. I think that it's so kind of it's such a circus, and there's really important issues that are right in front of us that we're not even touching on because.
We become a sound clip, as you said.
I think you're right. And unfortunately, Twitter, and not to lay this all on Twitter, but I think it's endemic of society where we are a next to no attention span, kind of 24-hour a day news cycle. You got to give it to them quick, and then keep repeat in order to get your message through. And I think that's unfortunate. I kind of long for more of a let me lean back a little bit and think of what I'm hearing, process it, and then develop an opinion. Yeah. But in 140 characters, it's all about just push. So we'll see. I think it's an interesting time. I think it's fun to be in the media business in an election year because there's just so much energy that's out there on the wavelength or on the airwaves, for lack of a better term. That it's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's. I think it is. I think what I like about the Denver Business Journal and the things that you do, at least that I see, is we have. I think as a society, because it's that push. The idea that we become kind of a headline generation.
Mm-hmm.
I think people love reading a headline, and if the headline's catchy, they read maybe the first paragraph of the article and then assume that they're knowledgeable about it, right? Without actually digging in. I think where you guys do a great job, and I think true journalism, you're talking Dan Ruther and all those pieces, is taking the time to actually dig in and get the full story.
Yeah.
And not just, hey, what's a catchy headline and what can I say in 140 characters that people want? How do you give people the full story? And I think eventually... I think that will always win out in the long run as far as true journalism and the people that you want to reach. As you said, your audience that you're giving content to, recognize that and find value in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting time.
It's an interesting time we live in, for sure.
I can't go on Facebook anymore, and it just half the things you're like, come on. I just don't get how, anyway, you put something on Facebook, you're not going to change anybody's opinion. Everybody has their own opinion.
No,
come on, just be fair.
No, you're not.
Well, it's good. Well, I always end with a fun question. And,
sure.
Similar question to last time. So you're 100 years old.
Mm-hmm. It's
your last meal.
Yes.
What is that last meal before you pass on? Food, drinks, a restaurant?
Absolutely. I will pay homage to my heritage, and I will say that it probably involves a very stiff margarita and a beautiful plate of enchiladas.
Yeah,
would send me off to
You'd be ready to go.
To the next place, fat and happy.
That's good. You gotta have that good last meal. And so I'll get a question from you. What we're gonna do from now is our previous guest is gonna give us a fun question that'll end our next episode. So I'll get that from you off air. But Pete,
Excellent.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
really
much.
Appreciate it. Everybody, definitely check out the Denver Business Journal, bizjournals.com for the local one in your area. But the Denver Business Journal, subscribe. They have a ton of great content. Check that out. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Take care.